what I really wanted was to try to make a symphony to God.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make something beautiful enough that God would hear me. He still hasn't.
Uh-huh. Hey folks, welcome to the Song Podcast. It's Saturday afternoon. It's the Variety Bar. It's not me in radio. I feel like a radio DJ. I'm joined by Chris. How you doing, Chris?
You're such a pro at this now.
Yeah.
Aye, that was smooth.
It was smooth as ice.
But this is not smooth radio. This is no mean radio.
No mean radio. Hey, you're smooth too.
I'm definitely not.
It's like we've been doing this for like 8.5 years.
It's a Saturday afternoon, but I feel like it's 9 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Didn't sleep so well. Anxious dreams.
What do you remember?
Perhaps for listening to this. Perhaps for listening to this week's record, and it's general messaging. But what did I dream about? I think it was sort of apocalyptic.
Yeah, the end of the world.
Yeah. It left me waking up thinking, are these the end times? Mark?
Yes. I think we can be no doubt about the fact this is the end times.
I think it seems to me that everybody's always caught between half dreading it and half hoping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you know, wanting to be the generation that was there for the end times. Out of all of human history, we were the ones that experienced the end times, even though, you know, Lake of Fire and all that kind of horrendous shit.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess in itself is kind of egotistical. Like, we were the chosen ones. We were the solipsistic, isn't it?
Well, I think every generation since the Second World War has felt that we're in the end times, right?
Yeah. There's some very, very good writing on this. John Gray has a book called Black Mass, and it's basically about millenarianism and how people talk about it like they dread it, but actually they kind of half want it because it feels really vindicating.
Yeah, totally. And I think particularly with the dawn of AI and a lot of the guys who are on the AI companies saying that AI could end the world, it's very much like that.
Accelerationists, futurists.
We don't have enough time to talk about accelerationism on this
your
podcast.
Curse files.
Your curse files, yeah.
Your teals.
Have you read that book yet?
Have I read
More Everything Forever?
No, I've not read
He
that.
talks about all that at the start of it and a lot more. Adam Becker, good book, recommended.
Well, he's one of those ones that's like, oh, won't it be awful? But, you know, I kind of want it to happen.
Aye, well, it's kind of, yeah, because he feels as though, no, we're not getting into this. we're not getting into this.
We're talking about long, protracted discussions. We've chosen a long one this week. But, I mean, I should point out as well, if these aren't the end times, there's certainly a number of people out there giving it a damn good try. Mm-hmm. You know,
definitely. I was saying, my pal Callum always says to me, he's like, see if we're about to get nuked, I'm taking my deck chair to Helmsborough. I'm just going to sit and watch Fastlane explode, and that'll be it. Just get taken out immediately, because you wouldn't want to be around afterwards. I
mean, yeah, it is the theme. I mean, it was it's very, very relevant right now. Actually, we'll come back to this because there's a couple of really topical sort of news intersections with this week's topic. As I say, big subject, expansive conversation. 90-minute double CD album is how this was originally released. It's a monster.
That's a good
this week
monster.
We're going to be covering the Texas Jerusalem Crossroads by the band Lift to Experience. So yeah, let's discuss, quote, 3 Texas boys busy minding their own business when the angel of the Lord appeared unto them, and that angel told them how the apocalypse was about to play out in the great state of Texas.
Are these Catholic boys?
No, they're not. They are. One of them is Baptist, and
Baptist is pretty much.
And 2 of them are Pentecostal.
Okay.
Yeah. The 3 boys were Josh T. Pearson, guitar and vocals, Josh Bear Browning on bass, and Andy the Boy Young on drums. As I say, they're collectively known as Lift to Experience, a name that I've frequently confused with Lift Through Experience. Don't know why. Their only album, Texas Jerusalem Crossroads, came out in 2001. So the revelation that album depicts came to them, or at least the genesis of the album. There's a pun for it. Came to them in the very late 90s. Okay, so around about the turn of the millennium, where there was a lot of millennial angst. There was also a lot of Y2K angst and dread. You know, the society was awash with that. You can remember all these like, I mean, it was a subject of a lot of films at that time as well. There was I don't know if you remember the film, I think it was Strange Days, that had, well, we've mentioned it a few times because it had a bunch of musical guests in it, like Skunk Anansie, Juliette Lewis. I think even Deftones were in that. But that was kind of, you know, the countdown to the millennium and, oh God, what's going to happen, millennium bug, all that kind of thing. So it's maybe not entirely surprising that despite their background, which we'll go into, that these guys were also sort of like ruminating a lot on the end of humanity. You know, a hell of a lot of like doomsday predictions around that time as well. And yet it did strike me that ironically these three Texans were living through one of the most sustained periods of international peace in human history.
It was the end of history, mate. Call it the Fukuyama, you know.
So I mean, well, Kosovo and Chechnya aside, which were just kicking off, I mean, to be clear, there were a lot of things taking shape that were going to affect the future, but at that moment the biggest news story of the previous 2 years was probably a blowy. You know, which now seems, I mean,
Oklahoma City bombing, was that
96?
96, yeah.
No, so I mean, probably Clinton, you know, 98 was when that revelation came out about Lewinsky, and that kind of like dominated the news for a long time. Seems laughable in hindsight now, you know, when you consider what Donald Trump's now accused of in these 4 Epstein files that managed to go missing, you know. But anyway, they were living through a relatively peaceful time for most of the world, not for everyone, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Allen, second time I'm invoking his name.
He's the apocalypse friend.
We were talking the other day about this whole Iran crisis and stuff like that, and he was like, I really think that our generation will be the last generation that had it even remotely approaching good. You know, because of this exact period you're talking about, you know. We grew up in an era where it was the most stable it's ever been, and there was a real sense of optimism about the future and about the world, and we thought we'd figure it all out because, you know, democracy had won, and, you know, it was the great time of boom everywhere.
Is that not quite egocentric though? I think a lot of people have said that. In fact, I know that a lot of people have said that. And when you look at the trends for like quality of life, life expectancy, all those kind of things, they're always, I mean, like everything, they can take, you know, little bumps, but the overall arc is, you know, towards the betterment of society and human experience. I am not trying to put a shine on the situation as it is, and I do get as well that the entropy rises, you know, as things like nuclear weapons and, you know, come into the picture, and pandemics with travel, air travel, all that kind of thing. Absolutely, no question, right? But I'm just careful to like not fall into the same trap as some of these people that we're talking about, who suddenly think that no, it must be about me, it must be about my generation. We're the ones that are going to experience it. We're somehow special, and actually, maybe we're not.
Well, I mean, our generation is the one that's now inheriting the world, right? Because they're beginning to run the world, in lots of places. I think the thing which is most striking about this particular period in history is that we exist in a seemingly perpetual polycrisis, which has never really happened before, you know.
Well, the thing is, it has, but it just happened in a different way. The invention of the printing press was another absolutely mammoth like upheaval of society for hundreds of years, and unfortunately maybe the internet is the same thing. So as I say, not trying to, you know, get all misty-eyed about the late 1990s.
Let's not do nostalgia.
Fucking Limp Bizkit were at number one, you know, so can't have been perfect.
I would take them over Sleep Token, mate.
Right, okay, fair point. But when this album came out, we were only 3 months shy of 2 aeroplanes flying into the Twin Towers, and things haven't really ever settled down properly since then.
It's almost like I had a point there, Chris.
Yeah, the ripples have continued to be felt from that. So who are Live to Experience? Well, their origins, they actually formed in 1996. Regular listeners might remember us referencing them during our one album wonder mixtape or split 7-inch. I think that was during COVID, during lockdown.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
We picked some albums when we did that. We picked one each. Why didn't you pick this one?
Because I wasn't really into them. I am still not entirely sure how much I am into them. This is one of the little wrinkles here. I just think it's a very, very noteworthy record because it is their only record and their only full album, sorry. And I think that alone is fascinating because it did make a bit of a mark. It's not like nobody cared. Like, it did have potential for growth. We'll talk about why that didn't happen. But no, it bounced off me quite a bit. We'll talk about that a bit later as well, and I'll explain why. So in the band, though, Josh T. Pearson, Josh 1, even though he is the focal point, and he's the one that went on to have a bit of a solo career as well, the band is definitively that aforementioned lineup, the two Joshes and Andy. Pearson's dad was, as I said, a Pentecostal preacher. Now, that means, damnation, sin, hellfire, brimstone, all that kind of stuff. Real, like, firebrand kind of preaching. And Josh Pearson met Josh 2, the Bear, in a church choir. So he was also involved in that church. They both then met Andy Young sometime later, after the two of them had been playing about and they wanted to get a drummer. They tried a few drummers out. Andy was the guy that really clicked. He was also from a religious background, but this time it was Baptist, so a bit more typically conservative religious, And he had apparently quite an incongruous taste for gangster rap, despite his religious background. Yes, in case you didn't guess from the album title, the genesis of all this will be very relevant shortly. But by 12 years old, Josh Pearson was already trying to learn things like Sex Pistols on guitar, which, given his family background, is a wee bit edgy. He then got really into shoegaze, post-rock, even like psychedelic indie, so stuff like My Bloody Valentine, Spiritualized, maybe Ride, bands like Slint. And so we'll talk a wee bit about the influences, the style, and the comparisons. And some of this is drawn from what they've said. Some of this is a bit of an inference on our part. But Josh told Louder Sound, there's some good interviews out there, he told Louder Sound in 2017 that his goal was to combine a Jimi Hendrix-style power trio with My Bloody Valentine. And yeah, they are very much a power trio, because the band were known for being incredibly loud live as well. And when you hear the album, it makes sense. But their performances were really, really voluminous. Josh's voice, I think, frequently sounds like a low-registered Jeff Buckley, and that's actually that's a common reference. This did get me musing. You actually brought it up just before we started recording. I would broadly class this band as post-rock. We'll maybe parse that a little bit. But how many post-rock bands are there with genuinely good singers? I can't really think of any.
I can't think of any at all either. Even when they're in Slint's music, it's not good vocals.
No, it's deliberately not. It's I mean, in like Mogwai's, it's very lo-fi vocals, and Godspeed, Ephraim's voice is. He doesn't really sing in Mogwai. He doesn't really sing in Godspeed. He tends to sing in Silver Mount Zion, but he's not a good singer, or not a typically good singer. I just can't really think of many post-rock bands. But I guess Talk are classed as post-rock.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's a proper singer, right?
But yeah, Josh's voice, Josh 1.
Yeah, Josh 1.
His voice is just a really good singer.
He's a great singer.
A good
He's
singer.
got a lovely voice.
But like even backing vocals as well, you can tell there's a choral influence, because you can hear that in the music.
Yes, that's them meeting in the church choir
makes sense.
Also, his listening for a long time. He said he really went off modern music, contemporary music, and just ended up listening to gospel stuff, and that really influenced it.
There is a big gospel field. Well, I don't know. Not gospel in the music sense, like the musical movement sense in the mid century, late 20th century, mid to late 20th century, but gospel as in the preaching sort of sense, the actual, like, you're in the church and you're singing the hymns kind of sense.
Yeah, that's true. The songs, we've mentioned a couple of these names, but the songs have swathes of Godspeed, they have swathes of Slint, they've got bits of slowcore, so bands like Low and Codeine and stuff. Along with Slint, I would also contest they probably have quite a lot of June of 44, who we've not really covered in depth on the show before, but we almost certainly will at some point.
Come up a bunch of times over the last 8 years.
And they're offshoot shipping news. There's a kind of looseness and a shifting restlessness to the arrangements, go from talking to loud to quiet to singing to... It's quite post-hardcore-esque, actually, the way it shifts about like that. They also incorporate a lot of My Bloody Valentine's shoegaze. I mentioned Spiritualized, that psychedelic British indie stuff. Personally, I also hear proggy indie stuff, like maybe the British band Dark Star. I'm maybe influenced there as well, because they're another band that only really had one big record, or certainly for a long time, one big record. But yeah, maybe they just have influences in common. Guitar nerds, by the way, you should note that one of the sounds you're hearing on this, Josh Pearson uses a Leslie rotary speaker.
Oh, nice. That makes sense.
To get that beautiful undulating mixture of chorus
cool.
and vibrato.
That's
so
cool.
literally the speaker is spinning inside the housing, and that gives it a really beautiful quality. There's not that many of them about, and when studios have them, they tend to attract a lot of particular styles of bands to those studios.
It's not happening in every guitar part though. Some of the quieter parts are very clean and they're not undulating, as you say.
In Josh's own words, Spiritualized left such a huge imprint on me with symphonic rock. We were pretty influenced by post-rock and early shoegaze stuff. I wanted to put more of a narrative over it because I thought more could be done with the genre. I think that's quite interesting. Bearing in mind that a lot of the early post-rock stuff actually did have quite a lot of narrative in it. So like Slint, Good Morning Captain, telling little stories like that. And then I guess you got bands like Sigur Rós, who obviously have their own invented language over it. And, it did used to be a feature. And then there was this huge branching off where loads of post-rock either had no vocals or the vocals were purely sort of textural, kind of often sampled, that kind of thing.
We've spoken about post-rock quite a lot in this podcast, and there are various episodes in which we go down the rabbit hole. But the particular brand of post-rock you're talking about, is that when Don Cab kind of basically influenced a whole bunch of these bands?
Yeah, well, it wasn't just Don Cab. Like, there was loads of stuff at that time, man. There was like Cul-de-sac, and there was Bark Psychosis, and there was Talk Talk. Tons of stuff. I think Bark Psychosis were the first band to actually be reviewed and called post-rock. But anyway, yes, it was back when post-rock was very much embryonic, and before it kind of seemed to split in this kind of direction where a whole branch of it started becoming mainly instrumental. So Explosions in the Sky being a really high profile example, and actually these guys knew them. Josh says we had Explosions in the Sky who would open for us here and we'd open for them there, and there'd be about 5 people at those shows. It was a small demographic at the time. I thought there was more to be done if you took a lyrical and sonic landscape that was interesting texturally and melodically with the interplay of the instruments. So he really saw, and I agree with him, the potential to take these sprawling canvases of post-rock songs. I mean, the Godspeed stuff's a great example. I mean, 20-minute songs, and to use them to tell these quite grandiose tales, because they do lend themselves to that, if you can actually sing. In terms of the band name, Lift to Experience, it's Nexus time here. It actually comes from a Yoko Ono art exhibition.
Wow.
Right? Her work frequently involved audience participation, audience interaction, so that, for example, there's a story of John Lennon climbing a ladder to go up and look through a hole, and it just said the word yes. And there were like little prompts like lift the flap, or there were what she called instruction pieces. So you can see where I'm going. Lift to Experience. It was part of one of her exhibitions. The album itself, as I say, one thing that makes them stand out is the fact they only ever produced one full album. And it's as meaty as you'll get, given that in 90 minutes. Like double CD, proper double CD back in the day was a sign of like, holy shit, I'm getting value for money here. Pitchfork, Riley reviewed it at one point, observing that like Texas, there's maybe just too much of it. But I mean, Texans are famous for always going big, right? That's the gag.
Aye.
So everything's bigger in Texas. Well, your post-rock's bigger in Texas as well, apparently.
I'd probably agree with that, to be honest. Like, I do think it is too much as a whole.
Yeah.
It has some outstanding moments, truly outstanding moments, but also has, it's only got a couple, like we spoke about this in Vessel's episode more.
Think about
more
when
recently.
this came out though, man. The turn of the millennium, right? More was more.
Yeah.
Still at that point. We were not at the point where you were back to like 40 and then 30-minute albums.
But what I was going to say is, like, we kind of spoke about in the Vessels episode, is that a lot of post-rock only really has 2 or 3 tricks, and that's it.
Yeah, well, certainly the more unremarkable post-rock does.
This band also only have 2 or 3 tricks, but the kicker is they actually have vocals, which a lot of other bands don't have, which makes it much more engaging, I think, for me personally.
Yeah, agreed. Religion and the Message. By the way, just to clarify, this was originally released in 2001 on Bella Union. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. It was then re-released in 2017 by Mute Records. We're going to break all that down because there's quite a lot to be said about those 2 different releases, how they sounded, how they were received, and where you could get them as well. But religion and the message, I really want to address this here. Okay, so as the title says, the Texas Jerusalem Crossroads, the album is characterized by a strong religious theme.
Mm-hmm.
The band, I think, is actually fairly impossible to extricate from that context entirely. But I would argue that they don't really fit into the box of Christian rock per se in terms of how they're marketed or how the music even conveys that meaning. I think if Christian rock is almost like, oh, that's cute, they're trying to copy real rock. Do you know what I mean? Like, or like, you know, kind of metalcore bands trying to like hijack the medium to inject their message into kids' heads about Jesus, or make kids that are from religious houses feel normal because they can listen to music that sounds like real music. I'm kind of, don't take me too literally here.
Yeah,
but do you know what I'm saying? Like,
going to say,
but you know, they're trying to like sort of offer them something that's safe, so they don't go out looking for other music that then, you know, gives them ideas that the Christian background doesn't want them to have.
Well,
I think there's a lot of that to it, and all I'm saying is this, I don't think works like that. It does have a strong religious theme, but in my opinion, the record makes just as much sense without religious sympathies in terms of the listener. I think you just appreciate it as a yarn, as a tale. It's woven into the fabric of it. It's like, I don't know, like Narnia is a very religious thing, but you can still watch it and enjoy it and appreciate it. I certainly did as a kid anyway, without really needing to give a shit or believe in the stuff that's behind it.
Yeah, I mean...
And by the way, the band seem very happy about that. The band seem very happy that religious people can enjoy their album.
Yeah, I mean, I think... So a couple of things to kind of pick up on your point there. I do understand what you're saying about this whole, like, these Christian rock bands, like, try to emulate quote-unquote real music.
Yeah, totally.
But I also think that's really reductive, because these people they're influenced by that stuff, right? I would probably call this Christian music, but...
if you're out there and you're a Christian rock band and you're offended, turn the other cheek.
I'd probably call this Christian rock to a degree as well, because we all, like, various genres of music have different messaging and different ways of delivering that message, and it's not just...
I don't think this is proselytizing, though. I think a lot of Christian rock is.
But the same token, though, you get hardcore, which is really positive, and you get hardcore, which is really not positive, and they're still hardcore. You know what I mean? They'll just get a different way of delivering that theme.
Christian rock, to me, the version that I'm talking about, I
know the version I'm talking about, I just think it's really reductive.
It feels like it is, I'm not denying that. But it feels like it's selling something. And it feels like it's trying to keep its kids away from the other stuff that has messages that they don't really want their kids considering.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I guess there's a lot of Christian imagery in Low as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, Low are a bit like this. Low are a religious band who sing a number of religious themes. Lion and Lamb is one of my favourite songs by them. I do not need to give a shit about Jesus.
Oh no, I think, don't get me wrong, I think you can appreciate music with that kind of message, whether it's like really like uplifting and positive about the religious experience, like Creed, for example, I suppose, in theory.
It feels more like it's proselytizing.
It does, but I think you can still enjoy that.
And and
I think you still enjoy that and be intellectually removed from it. Might be harder for some folk. I certainly think it's possible, right? I don't know if it's possible for me, but I think it's possible for people.
We're inevitably going to have to do an episode on this to try and
I was just thinking that, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, we're looking over the precipice here of a discussion that's going to turn this into a two-parter, and we're not doing that.
No.
But what is it that makes Low not corny, that makes this, I would suggest, not corny, but makes POD and... What was it?
Creed.
What was that? What's that kind of metalcore band? Starts with an A.
As I Lay Dying.
As I Lay Dying.
So
their early stuff.
They're really interesting as a result of this, because their music does not, like, they've got massive a religious fan base as well. Yeah. Because they just sing about. Under Oath is another example. They're definitely Christians, but their music has never really been Christian.
And then there are a number of whistleblowers that say that a huge number of those musicians, including As I Lay Dying, absolutely not
very
religious.
well known for being like, Tim was religious, but he definitely at some point became agnostic, at least in the course of the band.
No, I mean, it's a grift. According to a lot of people, and on that scene, they're like, none of us are religious. It's a grift. It's a guaranteed audience of 28 million people for a head start. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Okay, you're maybe alienating yourself from the wider world by being too religious, potentially, right? but also you're almost certainly getting endorsed by an enormous, fervent fan base of millions of people in America. And look, put it this way, right? If we were starting our bands and we were like, right, you can guaranteed have strong access to 28 million people, or you can maybe reach the whole world.
Yeah, I mean,
like business-wise, you're like, well, I only really need
I think the reason it
couple
works,
100,000.
the reason it works for a band like As I Lay Dying is because they're not really singing about Christian themes a lot of the time. You know what I mean? Or like Thrice is a good example.
Overtly.
Thrice is a band who Dustin is definitely very religious. He's in I don't know what sect, shall we say, of Christianity he's part of, but he's definitely very religious, but he's also like very quote unquote woke. All guys in the band are either atheist or agnostic or have their own religion, whatever. Some of the songs are very clearly religious songs, like with those themes. Come All You Weary is a great song by them, but a lot of their music is also not. Nobody would ever call them a Christian band, even though Dustin quite clearly, and has said in many interviews, like, I'll sing about what matters to me, and the other guys don't really care.
So again, we're definitely going to revisit.
Yes, we need to
properly.
revisit this.
Uncut Magazine actually said about this that, quote, when they emerged in the late 1990s, Lift Experience seemed less like a conventional rock band and more like a wild, hirsute millennial cult.
Yeah. It's so weird to think for that comment about them being like a conventional rock band, because in the fullness of time, reflecting on it now, it's like, well, they're just doing, we've heard of that, like, so many bands have done all this since, and it has almost conventional in places in both shoegaze and post-rock in the way that it's evolved since.
I think coming out straight out the gates with an apocalyptic, like, double album is quite hardcore, you know. I get their point, and there is something inherently odd about being overtly and earnestly religious in such enlightened times as ours. And this is the thing, so I was instinctively wary of any such band, and I didn't take to this band initially at first at all. I bounced off that religiosity, and I didn't really have the patience for the music either. My close pal, my flatmate at the time, Matt, was a huge fan. He actually went to see them. It was at the Venue in Edinburgh, rest in peace, the Venue. And he came home that night to the flat just raving about the spectacle. He said that one of the things I remember him describing was that they went on tour with this giant rotating fan, like kind of circular fan with a mesh grill over it, and they had a light that came out from behind it. And so it was just dead spellbinding, you know, totally mesmerising watching them play with this. Reading through their interviews and revisiting certain albums and certain lyrics, they were actually very self-aware about the religious aspect. The tongue-in-cheek elements sort of went over my head, you know, as quite a self-righteous early 20s atheist. Josh spoke to the writer Jordan Dowling in 2007 and said, quote, people are smarter now. They can see that if it's good art, it's good art. But when we were doing it, we really had to walk a tightrope. We were informed from this tradition and we had to be true to ourselves, but I think we definitely created a sublime enough piece of work. Traditionally, Christian art has always been that way. It can affect you regardless of whether or not you're in agreement with the ideology. It was difficult for me to tightrope that lyrically. I tried to put enough humour in there so I got my point across in a way where I could live with myself. I wanted it to be a good work of art while saying all the things I wanted to say and getting all the scripture out that I wanted. So I didn't really pick up on that self-deprecating humour at all. We'll look at the cover art in a second, for example. But it seems the pomposity of the album theme alone is not lost on them. But in saying that, there are still some very sincere beliefs, and there's definitely a sense of purpose. So again, Josh, speaking to the Quietest this time, said religion informs my life in the way it absolutely has to, having been brought up with it. And I wouldn't say it was shoved down my throat. I chose to swallow it, hook, line and sinker. Andy did too. Pentecostal is how I was raised. It's more hands up in the air. Andy's daddy was a Baptist preacher, so Andy's way of rebellion was to go to church at the Pentecostals, you know. He says it was wild, rolling on the floor. Holy rollers, speaking in tongues, physical manifestations of the presence of God. My southern religious upbringing also gave me the impetus to really try to prove myself to a higher being. Such things are important when you have a real fervent belief in the concept of an afterlife in hell. Salvation is free, but you've got to earn it. What I really wanted was to try to make a symphony to God. Mental. Uncut asked him about his original intention with the album as well, and they replied, it was to ask forgiveness for sins I hadn't committed. I wanted to make something beautiful enough that God would hear me. He still hasn't.
That's a lot of weight to put on a thing.
Absolutely. And by the way, we were talking about the scale and the ambition of this first release. This was meant to be the first of a trilogy of three of these. Three, I'd assume, around about 90-minute epics. And it's to document the 3 sections of this final battle between good and evil.
Why didn't they do that?
Talk about that in a moment. But in terms of the lyrics and theme of this one, the opening track, it's Just As Was Told, sees the 3 boys, Pearson, Browning and Young, approached by the angel of the Lord and told that the USA is the centre of Jerusalem. Which this is an interesting sidebar, I think, but I would suggest is actually pretty sinister to the rest of us. The USA being the new Holy Land, the USA being the final site of the final battle, especially in light of the holy war narrative of American ventures in the Middle East, not just American ventures in the Middle East. I think a good example would be like, for example, Pete Hegseth,
right now,
current American Secretary of War, hoorah, whatever the fuck it is they say, and his like quite sinister Deus Vult, and he's got a cross of Jerusalem, kind of Crusades referencing Knights Templar tattoo, all that kind of patter. That guy being in that position, but clearly having that set of beliefs, that ideology, is extremely alarming.
Very much so.
And I think it's a kind of similar quality when Americans do start singing about being the site of the final battle. I think it's also topical because I think it was just last month there were more than 110 complaints to what they call the Military Religious Freedom Foundation that American troops had been told by senior commanders that Donald Trump was, quote, anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. Now, that was a senior American military commander, at least one of them, telling the troops that verbatim, and hundreds of those troops complained about it. Like, this is really alarming. Am I now a holy warrior? Am I storming the walls of the Middle East, the Crusades? I mean, what is this? What is this we're doing? So when Josh Pearson sings the line, when America falls, the world will fall with her, I think it's okay to raise an eyebrow to that. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it plays into that really, really Christian nationalism narrative, which is like very, very huge. Huge right now, As for that song itself, man, this is like, you notice the vocals right away.
Which one are we talking about?
The first, you said just as was told. So like the vocals were the first thing that struck me about it.
Yeah.
Like, because they're excellent, and they're excellent throughout the record. That's like, and I think really like I said, they've got 2 different speeds. He's either singing and they're doing a quiet or loud part, or he's talking and they're doing a quiet or loud part. There's not really much else happening there. But my favourite thing about this particular song is it feels more post-hardcore than anything else, because it's really frantic, but it's the only time they really go in this mode.
It
shifts,
this record. It shifts a lot. Yeah. The 6th track, The Ground So Soft, I don't know what you thought of that one, but it opens with an a cappella vocal from 1 Corinthians. The line is, death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory?
Oh, interesting.
There's some deep cut religious references in here. The 8th one, When We Shall Touch, features an extended quote from the book Paradise Lost, John Milton's book. And the 11th track, Into the Storm, features a quotation from the Confessions of St. Augustine. So it's like he knows his scripture and he knows his peripheral, Milton's obviously not scripture, but he knows all of that kind of like side mythology, all the fan fiction that Milton came up with that has become almost synonymous with the Bible, devil and all the fallen angels and all that, Lucifer and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that comes from what is effectively medieval fan fiction. Just dead interesting.
It totally does, yeah.
But I mean, in fairness, there's also a bunch of other much more light-hearted stuff that I definitely failed to pick up on when I first encountered the band. The 5th track, Waiting to Hit, the Lord commands the band to inform the world about, quote, the glory of the Texas Jerusalem Crossroads, and Josh Pearson replies, Lord, I'll make you a deal. I will if you give me a smash hit so I can build a city on the hill. Yeah,
it's one of my favourite songs on the record. That's because it has that kind of light-hearted feel to it, it's also one of the more shoegazy tracks on the record. I think when you mentioned shoegaze earlier on, they're not as abrasive as like My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
They're a bit more gentle. It's more washes and like digging in.
Yeah, it's less caustic and a bit more psychedelic.
Totally. But it's a really great song. That it's probably the, like I said, probably my favourite on the record. Both the loud parts and the quiet parts, the guitar tones on this song and on the whole record, to be honest, are just superb stuff.
There's a couple other lines that I thought were really worth mentioning. There's one where he describes himself as just a stupid ranch hand in a Texas rock band trying to understand God's master plan, which is a great rhyming scheme. And there's one all you haircut bands doing headstands thinking you'll turn the world upside down because we're simply the best band in the whole damn land, and Texas is the reason.
Yep, totally.
There you go, a bit of a hipster name drop there.
Absolutely,
and I bet you that wasn't by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Any other songs really jump out? What did you feel like more overall?
Falling from Cloud 9 is just a superb bit of work, honestly. Leans more into shoegaze and post-rock, huge use of dynamics. One thing they do really well on this record, and this song and in a couple of other songs, is they go whisper quiet, not just quiet, but like it's just down to like nothing. And then they don't explode like a lot of other bands do, but they tend to build it back up, which is a really nice touch because it helps the vocal to kind of lead. I guess a lot of post-rock bands will do whisper quiet and then really loud with a guitar.
It feels a bit less gimmicky that way, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And that gives you the sense that they are weaving a narrative with us telling a story, because you have the vocals, the hook, or the linchpin, I suppose, of that.
I'm getting the feeling you liked it overall.
I think I did like it overall, honestly. I think, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. One thing you can't do at this record, though, is fuck. That is absolutely, you absolutely cannot do that.
90 minutes, man, good luck.
Yeah, but otherwise, it's probably one of the most engaging and entertaining post-rock records I've heard for quite some time. And that's probably because it's got vocals on it, and the vocals are interesting, and they add a whole layer of dynamics to it. And it shows you can actually do it. I think, a lot of the time I get a sense that post-rock bands feel as though they can't do it for whatever reason. Probably just don't have somebody in the band that can sing or can write vocals or sing very well, but why not try? Because it's clearly very possible. And if you've got these, like you said earlier on, like Josh said, if you've got these huge, expansive soundscapes, why not use that to your maximum advantage? It's a very maximalist record. That's what I like about it, even though it's a 3-piece.
Absolutely. It's Texas in that sense. Like a Texan burger, like 5 stacks high. Your Can't Fuck This record's got me... It's conjured some pretty vivid images, like the floor strewn with checked shirts as hipsters trying to fuck. They probably got it in vinyl as well, not in CD, so they have to interrupt the proceedings 3 times to turn the side.
Try to take off the beanie and the dungarees and the boots.
When it goes really quiet, try not to grunt or cry.
Wait for this moment. Shh.
So the artwork, as I mentioned, is consistent with that kind of tongue-in-cheek tone. It was actually kind of unironically mocked by the press, who I think missed that gag. But Pearson has admitted that that's also partly because the label didn't execute it right. Did you say you know who did it?
Well, the artwork.
Yeah.
So it was so it was produced by Simon Raymond. Raymond. Aye. His first wife, Karen, did it.
Right. Okay.
On instruction from the band.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, right? The cover is deliberately referencing what the shitty sort of what they call pen and pixel style. That was a Texan company that did all the shitty gangster rap covers for the likes of Cash Money Records.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So they did some early Snoop Dogg. I think Chris Rock loved their stuff as well, so he'd got them to do a couple of their live albums. But it's deliberately crap looking. Have you ever watched that Louis Theroux rap documentary? Weird Weekends, when he does that and he gets these crap covers, right? But the thing is, from the sounds of it, Karen Raymond didn't go as cheesy as the band wanted, and thus Josh thinks the joke fell kind of flat, because in the end the cover wasn't ridiculous enough to be obvious.
Aye.
Like they wanted it to be really extremely stupid looking, and Karen didn't do that.
Aye, well, if you go on Reddit and you see people talking about it, like, this is a shit album cover, and a lot of folk, some folk are like, that's kind of the point, but a lot of people don't see that.
You don't see that, yeah. So Josh says, you needed to go beyond or nothing. We wanted to add a little humour to it, Southern boys pretending to be something you're not. I wanted it to be obvious to people that we got the joke, but it didn't really seem to come across to people as much as I wanted. The Brits seemed to get it. They thought it was funny, but I think Americans didn't. However, I did notice there's at least a nice gold Star of David in the cover that'll get the conspiracy buffs animated. In terms of we've kind of compared some of the lyrics and things, the sincere versus ironic religiosity. It's worth saying the band are not simply spoofing religiosity, right? As much as they do seem to have a healthy playfulness and self-awareness, there's no question that Josh also has some of his dad's religious fervour. Especially I've noticed it cropping up in some of the interviews he's done outside of the music itself. He actually spoke to Uncut about modern music, saying the quest for transcendence is just as relevant now as it was back then. 20 more years is where it will really get interesting. Mystery is dead. God has flown. There are no great pilgrimages to art, not when it's a double click. How could there be? Romance is over, the way of the dodo will never be lost again. It undermines the whole I once was lost, now I'm found paradigm. Music has changed so much. Nothing is threatening now sonically. Uniqueness is gone. The price for tolerance is mediocre art, a small price to pay. I mean, he's a bit of a firebrand when he wants to be, and it's quite misanthropic as well as take. He also told the Quietus, there's a great divide that's going to come between those who introduce technology into their bodies and those that don't. I'm not joking at all. The next 15 years is where it's going to get really interesting. The internet is just a light flashing east to west. It's just the beginning of the beast that will swallow us up, and those that don't take it will get left behind.
I mean, he's probably right there.
I mean, but it's
quite fanciful though.
Yeah, it's conveyed in such a biblical fashion as well. And I would hate to ask him what he thinks about vaccines on the back of that. I mean, fingers crossed, you know. But so it's okay, I think, to muse briefly at this point on such a weird collision of tones and themes in this band. The humour and the sincerity, the playfulness, but like the artistic ambition of it all. The reception in the UK and the USA was wildly different, right? So, as mentioned, there are two releases of this record. The original, 2001, on Bella Union, which is the Cocteau Twins affiliated imprint, which has released the likes of Explosions in the Sky and stuff. Then there was another one released in 2017 on Mute Records. The two versions are actually really quite different, with an entirely new remix and remaster. And it wasn't until that second release that this album, ironically, was even available in the USA. So in the States, to get this Texan album about Texas, you had to spend big bucks on a European import. And of course, for years it wasn't possible to stream either, because this came out in 2001, and you know the broadband didn't happen until much later. So it became very cult and very mysterious as an album to its US fans. Hence, not long ago, there was a vinyl of the 2001 original changing hands for about $1,000 on Discogs.
Wow.
But why no USA? So in the same manner as a few famous names before them, let's say like Hendrix, Nirvana, Bill Hicks even, in comedy, Lift Experience didn't really get initial traction in the USA, but they were becoming a cult act in the UK, and that helped elevate their, excuse the pun, that helped elevate their profile back home. Why is that? Well,
the reverse bush.
The reverse bush, exactly. Also an incredibly attractive way to shave yourself. But their original demos, when they were posted out to the US labels in the late 90s, that music scene was obsessed with new metal, and they were just hitting a brick wall with it. And then when this album came out in 2001, it was the same summer as White Blood Cells by the White Stripes, and it was the same summer as Is This It by the Strokes. So you can kind of see where music was at there, and again, it's not where they're at.
Was it at the same time as The Earth Is Not a Cold Dead Place by Explosions in the Sky came out?
Could have been. Maybe
it's a bit later. Maybe.
I think that's a little bit after. But they were always a tough sell musically, but especially in those moments of peak trend, where the peak trend was so far away from where they were at. The religious themes also likely didn't help. In 2017, Josh told the writer Fred Pizarro, who he writes for a website called clairvoyant.com, part of the reason we never got on an American label was because of the religious content. If you weren't a left-leaning liberal or didn't reject and outright refuse your older shady Christian past, things you had nothing to do with, no responsibility of which was your own, you were catalogued into this marginalised group of music that could not be good in any circumstances.
This is kind of what you were saying earlier on.
Yeah, totally. Even after the UK release and a warm press reception to Texas Jerusalem Crossroads, it didn't get licensed. This seems to be largely because Simon Ramond of Bella Union was also acting as their manager, as well as the label owner, as well as the producer of the record, and he basically refused to license it to the States because that would mean splitting the income. And Josh had said in hindsight that was really not a great arrangement. In contrast, in the UK, the Lift Experience were also one of the many groups to benefit from the attention of John Peel. He had them in for 3 Peel sessions. I think it was 3 sessions in like 5 months, which is crazy. Those Peel sessions actually appear on the deluxe reissue of the album. And it was that reissue that first saw the album become available in the USA. In terms of the differences between those versions, so actually there was an even earlier version of this album. It was recorded for $700 the year prior, So that would be late 90s at this point. And it met with total silence when it was mailed around the various labels. The band weren't happy with it. They then spent a year sort of playing shows and improving it. And to be clear as well, the songs are all fully rehearsed and mapped out. There's not an element of improv here, despite the length and the style of the music. It is mapped out. This is how these songs were written and played. When it was recorded, the tracks were done in 2 or 3 takes. Apparently that was largely due to lack of funds. The studio, by the way, nice little detail, the studio was right next to a rail track where Josh Pearson said he'd been with his first love, the girl that he first fell in love with, and he said he found the recording quite profound as a result of that.
There's one of the songs that got trains in it.
Yeah, train. Exactly, he said that trains are a big theme of a lot of the work. The version of the album that was released had real financial difficulties too, so he told Uncut, I owed the Texas studio money for tracking. All my gear was in pawn shop. The studio wouldn't let us mix it until we paid for the actual recording of it. The band didn't really know how to proceed. Luckily, Bella Union stepped in. Signing with Bella Union, though, apocryphally, if you look this up, most depictions say that Lift Experience were spotted while performing at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, by Robin Guthrie and Simon Raymond. I'm sure that's the version that South by Southwest like, because they sell that to the thousands of bands that are racking up debt every year to play in bar toilets and behind dumpsters down lanes. Anyone that's never been to South by Southwest doesn't necessarily realise everywhere has shows to the point of absurdity, like shows in this room, another show in that room, another show in that room, a show in a toilet, show in outside a petrol station, a show in people's back gardens. I mean, there's touring bands finding themselves playing in a gazebo in somebody's back garden and thinking that it was going to be a proper show, presumably like hoping they'll be spotted by some guy from Sony taking a shit behind a tree, right? But the truth about this is a little bit of a sidebar, sorry, but the truth is a little bit more nuanced. And anybody familiar with South by Southwest's actual business model probably isn't surprised. Lift Experience and Bella Union were already in touch. The band had previously released a split record with another band called The Autumns. And The Autumns were later recording with Simon Raymond in London. And they were kind of pushing Lift Experience on them, really recommending them big time. For that session, the Autumns actually covered an early and surprisingly short Lift Experience song called With the World Behind It. With the World Behind, which is quite an intimate song. I think it's about suicide and kind of foreshadows some of Pearson's later solo work. So Simon Raymond really liked it, and he and Robin got in touch with Lift Experience shortly after. So really the South by Southwest appearance was simply the chance for the Guthrie and Raymond to see them in person. And that really is kind of the South by discovery myth in action. So, I mean, sidebar rant here, like bands being spotted and signed spontaneously at South by Southwest, it probably does happen, right? But likely far more common are bands who have existing buzz and or even pre-contract discussions using South by Southwest to get across the Atlantic to either convince the label or in many cases just to sign the paperwork. And that so many of these bands' flights and costs and trips are funded by domestic art funds might seem a little bit questionable. Wait, are we using art funds so that Sony can save in their airfares? And the answer is, well, yes, we frequently are using, in our case, Creative Scotland money to pay for airfares so that they can go and sign a contract. But anyway, Josh described the prospect of working with the members of Cocktail Twins to Fred Pissarro again. He said, it was really exciting. We had contact before with them from a show we played with the Autumns. They had heard the tunes and wanted to see it live and translated. It was exciting to have your heroes there and have the accents. It was pretty surreal. Growing up in Texas against the pricks and all that redneck shit, you'd go for something that's as punk rock as you can find, like Cocktail Twins. That stuff was wild. They were like aliens. Especially that band, you'd hear crazy sounds from her voice. So, I mean, they were clearly like over the moon that they were going to find an outlet for this album that they didn't. They were struggling to get the tapes off the studio. They couldn't pay to mix it. They didn't know what was going to happen, and suddenly this landed in their lap. But the deal with Bella Union wasn't exactly a windfall, and the band's reflections on it now, in hindsight, are kind of mixed. So Josh told The Quietus, we weren't there for the original mix, Bell Union had no money and were going bankrupt. I think they were actually getting evicted for the studio, if I remember. They wouldn't fly me over. They said they'll put it out, but they had to mix it there, and I had no money to fly, no advance or anything. The record had been recorded for years, but no one wanted to touch it. They mixed it there within a week and a half in the studio, and it just broke our hearts as soon as we heard it. It didn't capture the testosterone-driven nature of the band, which was pretty heartbreaking at the time because we were a really threatening sonic soul. Swans were an influence to us at the time, at least aesthetically, in terms of sound and volume. There was nothing we could do at the time, and we weren't happy with it, but I think they just mixed it safe, maybe like an 80s record. The whole thing sounded underwater, and it was pretty heartbreaking for us, but we were just glad it was out there. So a bit of a mixed bag. Yeah, mixed feelings on it. And you can relate to that, like, oh, well, it's making it, although it's not really what we can hear in our own heads. And I think the next chapter of this band, this goes back to when you were saying, well, why didn't they follow it up with 2 and 3? There's a bit of dissolution and there's a bit of tragedy here. So the press reaction to the album in Europe was positive, but the total indifference to the USA meant the band were still under serious financial strain. Even though the European tours were slowly improving, the momentum was draining out the project. The band had toured the UK 3 or 4 times, and they were looking at doing it again. They had one planned, but life intervened, and the tour, which was going to be their biggest, was cancelled. Basically when Josh Browning's young wife died of an accidental overdose. Again, I would imagine a horribly common feature of poverty in places like Texas. So following that, Josh Pearson moved to a town of less, it was like 200 and odd people in this town. Supposedly, by the way, his house cost him $10,000. So aspiring homeowners take note, move to small towns in Texas maybe. In theory, he said he retreated there to write part 2 of the trilogy, which I think was tentatively titled Post-Apocalyptic Blues, but it never materialised. I do believe some of the tracks might have appeared in his solo work. He said he had about 2 or 3... I think he had about 2/3 of it done, but couldn't get further. He said to the Quietist, you need time to sit with new music. You sit with it, play it, record it, sit with it again. It's like opera. Back in the day, Wagner worked on the Ring cycle for 20 years. Love a good Wagner reference. Deadlines and stuff are where it gets kind of tricky. Just let it sit, but we wouldn't put anything out unless it was part of the same stratosphere of quality. I honestly believe with Live to Experience, I created one of the best albums of the last 10 years, and I didn't want to create something that is lesser to that. Andy Young said he described the split as a bit more of a trial separation. He didn't necessarily feel that it was final, but obviously tragic circumstances, total lack of finance and momentum, that was it. Josh kind of agrees. He says we never really split up, we basically just fell apart. We didn't know what we were doing, we were kids, we got no help, you couldn't even Google stuff. It wasn't even like someone could give you a thumbs up on MySpace and you could feel better about your day. America did not care, and I didn't want to do that much work again on something if no one cared. So I moved out to the middle of nowhere in Texas, and I went a little nuts for a couple of years. I wouldn't leave the house for a month and never go near the village. The inward journey, that's the real trip. It took a year to come down after that one. I wouldn't recommend it. I had to fight tooth and nail for the mind to come back. There was nothing to fall back on. It wouldn't have been like a cute Brian Wilson story with your own private doctor. It would have been me at a state-run funny farm with no possible outcome toward recovery. That, or end on the street, which now that I think about it, I guess I did. So Josh Browning, I guess, once he was starting to recover for the loss of his wife, started a part-time band called Year of the Bear. Andy Young actually moved to Manchester for a while and played in a project called Western Arms with Guy Garvey, the band Elbow, who they had actually toured with and become really good friends with. Supposedly Elbow actually opened for Live to Experience for a couple of times in France before Elbow got huge, and that they became really good friends there. There's a story about them going to a strip club and Josh ending up on the floor getting walked about with a belt around his neck like a dog leash. Garvey would actually become a really important figure in the future shortly. Josh Pearson went to Europe, spent 6 months in Paris and then 2 years in Berlin, on the fly, not with Right to Remain. Regarding Berlin, he said, I went there to compete in the World Beard and Moustache Championships. I entered in the full beard freestyle category as the Texas Tornado. I wound my beard up like a twister and stuck a toy car and a plastic cow in it. It turned out it was too avant-garde for the judges, but I met a hot young German girl and she's now my wife. I should add, now his ex-wife. And that's actually not a joke, by the way. I thought he was just being totally sarcastic, but I checked it out. That beard competition runs every 2 years in different cities. It's actually been judged by Nick Cave in the past. Like, get celebrity judges in for it. He did genuinely enter it.
Wow.
I know.
Next is gold.
But when you see him, you're like, all right, yeah, the guy's got some potential there. You going to maybe give it a go at some point?
No, never.
Well, never say never. Eventually, Josh went back to Texas and he made a bunch of select appearances on other records, because by then he had a wee bit of cult status amongst those in the know. So, for example, he played on Fur and Gold by Bat for Lashes. He later re-emerged to do a solo album which had a lot about his divorce in it, called The Last of the Country Gentlemen. That was actually recorded in Berlin over 2 days and features Warren Ellis on violin. 33 Bad Seeds, all the Nick Cave affiliations. By the way, given the links between Warren Ellis and Nick Cave, I'm not sure if that's a conflict of interest regarding the moustache and beard competition.
Good point.
Yeah. Mute loved that solo record and they put it out in 2011, and that kicked off the ongoing relationship between Mute and him. He toured it solo. He toured supporting 65 Days of Static, so not small gigs. And he became an artist's artist, really. So, I mean, Mark Lanegan, one of the most famous voices in modern rock, hailed him as a truly special talent, and Guy Garvey claimed he was the greatest male vocalist of our time. And what happened was there was a reunion. So in 2016, that same Guy Garvey curated Meltdown Festival at the South Bank Centre in London. By this point, Elbow were massive. Guy Garvey was hosting a show on BBC, right? It was a 10-day event. It featured like Robert Plant, Laura Marling, Femi Kuti, a bunch of other people, right? And he made a point of convincing Lift to Experience to do it. They had assumed that they were going to be playing like a kind of typical festival, mid-afternoon on a stage with a bunch of other bands. Instead, they headlined to 2,500 people, and it became the biggest show they'd done. It was almost 15 years to the day since they'd played in the UK. Guess where their last show was before that?
Glasgow somewhere.
King Tut's.
King Tut's, wow.
Yeah. Back when it was good. And just prior to that,
back when it was
just prior to that reunion, which was only weeks before the London show that they actually got together to start rehearsing again, they'd been out of touch for years. And to illustrate what I think is a really funny contrast in fortunes, right after the gig at the South Bank show, so 2,500 people headlining at the South Bank show, the next morning, Josh Browning had to get an early flight back to Texas to go make sandwiches at Skeet's Grill off the highway next to Sweetwater because he couldn't get more time off.
That's wild,
from working the grill at Skeet's Grill.
We've all been there, mate. We've all been there.
That's fucking beautiful, though, isn't it? What were you up to yesterday, Josh? Where were you for the last couple of days? I was headlining a show in the South Bank Centre in London. Like, fuck off. No, you weren't. But Josh Pearson said, we were scared. We wanted it to be as good as it was. We'd rather burn that shit to the ground than have it not be pure. We hadn't been in the same room together for some years, but we wanted it to be like a celebration. So yeah, and then the reissue came out on the back of that. With all that new activity and that existing relationship between Josh and Mute, the solo work, plans formed, and this time they were going to include US distribution. Given the band's mixed feelings on the first edition, a reissue wasn't enough. It had to be remixed and, in this case, remastered.
Mastered for the first time?
Yeah, you said the first one wasn't properly mastered.
Yeah, so according to some folks on the internet, could be true or not, when you were earlier on talking about the money situation, they could either pay to get it mixed or get it mastered.
Yeah.
And they chose to get it mixed. A lot of bands will just also choose that if they have no money. Like, I think we've been in projects that have done that. Anybody who's ever been in a band has probably been in a situation thinking, well, what does mastering really do for a record? It turns out it does quite a lot.
It does do quite a lot, yeah. But it was very, very fashionable, certainly for a while, to get your mate to master it because he had a computer and it had a mastering menu on it, a button, a drop down, a couple of presets.
But a good mastering engineer will actually be able to tell when stuff needs to be louder and quieter and all that, and it's another set of ears. But in this case, it was the first time it was ever mastered, but I guess it was remixed as well. Yeah.
So Josh told Clash magazine, we went back to the studio, neck deep in the heart of Texas, where Lift recorded that first album, remixing the album the way it should have been originally. It's good to have our balls back after years of being castrated. there's so many intricate parts that Andy was doing on his drums and stuff that you just kind of lost, and you could hardly hear my guitar before. That was my regret. I just needed a little bit more accurate representation. And he also told Uncut that I think the original mix was sped up. It felt like there'd been a veil over it. The whole thing just felt so alien. So this one was back to being what the original intended. That fresh, shiny new remix was released in 2017 by Mute, along with the deluxe edition that I mentioned, had the Peel sessions and a couple of early releases on it as well. There's no question that the clarity and the general fidelity of the album is vastly improved. That said, there's some real aesthetic changes, which didn't please everybody, but responses in the press were mainly very positive. Uncut said the new mix is an immersive experience, where before it was perhaps enough to be impressed by the sonic swoop of the music. Echoes and Dust said they picked out a couple of highlights. 10-minute epic with crippled wings has a newfound reassuring warmth and glow, introducing a little hope to what was originally a track with a cold chill permeating through it. Not entirely surprising that somebody that mixed Cocktail Twins would make your track a bit more chilling. They are quite a chill band in their own way. But Echo and Dust also said, throughout the album, there's a newfound clarity and resonance to the guitar tones and a vibrancy in the voices with backing harmonies to the fore. Quietus said, Gaia Cortasa, the writer, layers of reverberated voices were added to tracks like Down Came the Angels, increasing the gothic church-like atmosphere. That's what you were talking about. The big phased space guitars of Falling from Cloud 9 came close to disappearing, only to find a new place as a haunting presence in with Crippled Wings. The messy track, The Ground So Soft, is finally tidied up without losing its complex tiered structure, gaining more volume, more noise somewhere in the process. The iconic megaphone filtered voice of When Shall We Touch gives way to a clear vocal part, more comprehensible but less alluring. The wrenching Down With the Prophets, once a lo-fi acoustic guitar and voice track, is enriched with strings for an overstriking and impressive effect.
Yeah, I mean, that song is just great. Like, the strings in the remixed and remastered version of it have the tremolo-y, post-rocky guitar quality, which gives it a really nice texture.
Yeah.
And I love a clattery, lo-fi acoustic guitar. I'm a big sucker for that kind of thing. So,
well, it's interesting though that, just stepping back and saying, When Shall We Touch, they did end with a comment saying it was more comprehensible, but that it was less alluring. So a bit of nuance in that. And they also commented that there was maybe a little less magic than before, privileging as it does the huge depth of its new enhanced sonancy, interesting word, over the narrative, but with a thundering energy ready to strike the listener like God's own lightning. So they were kind of like, you threading the needle, saying it does sound better, but there might be some charm missing from some of those early versions. I guess you can make up your own mind. And since then, well, on the back of the reissue and the renewed interest, Lift Experience did get their wish somewhat, and they performed a small series of US shows. Their final performance to date, at least that I'm aware of, was fittingly at the Central Presbyterian Church during South by 2017. Whether they'll ever be heard from again is unclear. Maybe Josh is waiting for that Wagnerian 20-year ring cycle marker. But he in particular seems a bit misanthropic regarding the way society, particularly in relation to music, has evolved, as I kind of laid out in those quotes. He told the writer Jordan Dowling in 2007, I've stopped listening to music. This is in 2007. Recorded music, that is. Obviously, I still see live shows, but I don't get anything from them anymore. I'm more influenced by my surroundings. Going to church 3 times a week growing up, a gospel influence is definitely there. And following the reissue, he kind of lamented to the Quietus, I think we were born in a very romantic age. And if romantic music was supposed to be the birth of tragedy, today really is the death of tragedy. Technology is going to end all crime with everything being watched, catalogued and calculated and stuff. It's good and bad. And of course, the music's going to start sucking now because everything's gentrified, whereas that great stuff came out of difficult times. So bring it on, bring on the apocalypse. I'm all for it. There's a few other quotes. He doesn't like smartphones, that's for sure. He really likes The Cure. He said, when you were a kid and you got a record on vinyl, it was sacred, it was holy, there was mystery to it. Holy fuck, where did The Cure come from? You're up in North Texas, you've never heard anything like these sounds before. Robert Smith, his hair's all done up like that. It rocked my world. I'd never seen anything like that. That was something special. Mystery was still alive, and if you said goodbye to someone, you might never see them again. when the phone rang, you didn't know who was going to answer. And when someone knocked at the door, you'd go, who the fuck's knocking at my door? Shall we answer? I don't know. But of course, I finally sold out and bought a smartphone this year, and I knew I'd be addicted. I thought it would take maybe 2 days, and it was about 2 minutes. It's incredible. I've got 8,000 pictures on this. I've got naked women, maps. How do you turn down either one of those things? Those are awesome. And I guess whilst I don't really vibe with a lot of Josh's apocalyptic visions and religiosity, it's kind of hard to disagree with his last statement.
Yeah, totally.
Big up the maps and naked women, I suppose, if that's your thing.
If that's your thing, then
yeah. But no, he's very skeptical. He's very skeptical on how phones and modern music are affecting young people, their experience of music, the lack of reverence for music as something worthy of not just money, but worthy of like, oh, it's so disposable, it's so transactional now, and it's so much of it is so fake, really. And I think from that, I'm not sure if he sounds like somebody who's going to venture back out into that world.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like he's maybe made his peace with the fact that he's from another time.
Yeah,
you know,
I think he felt out of time even at that time.
Totally.
But overall, quite an interesting, proposition, aren't they?
Interesting record, interesting band, interesting approach to the music. Yeah, I mean, it was a really good record, I think. Too long, for sure.
I agree with that. Yeah, too long.
It
would never be that length now, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they would have been advised, like, come on, let's cut it down.
Some of the songs just go on for too long, and the couple
last
of songs
one is about 28 minutes or something.
Yeah,
like that.
some of the songs are quite similar in a way which you wouldn't get away with now, you know. But I think for the most part it works, and we love an imperfect record on this podcast. So
you don't want to be cutting any important details out of the apocalypse, though. If this really is a revelation, then you don't want to be skimming over it.
It does make you wonder as well, like the chicken and egg sort of scenario, right? It's like, were the lyrics written and then it was like, we need to fit music to this, or vice versa? Did we write these big expansive pieces and then try to fit in stuff to it? A bit of editing on the other side could have maybe made for a tighter record, for sure.
I think there's probably a bit of push and pull there, yeah. I think he probably had things that he wanted to fit in, and certain passages maybe ended up longer so he could really say what he wanted to say. But yeah, I do suspect that the music was the main priority to start with, at least.
Probably.
But yeah, pretty special. And a band that's always been in my periphery. As I say, all those years ago, Matt getting so into them, and I just couldn't quite, chime with them. But I think intellectually, at least, I find them very intriguing, very interesting band. And yeah, maybe it's going to grow on me. I mean, it's a 90-minute album, and even the folk I know that like it say it did take a long time for them to really get into it. But they said it's also very immersive. It's great if you put it on and you ride the whole thing out, especially now that it's digital. I guess you can just play start to finish without an interruption, and it's a really wonderful experience. A lift to experience.
Well, this has been a really fun episode. Enjoyed getting to know this band at pace. We're recording on a Saturday, which we don't usually do. Thank you very much to the Variety Bar, to No Mean Radio for having us, our new host, No Mean Radio.
Sean and Gail, big up.
Yep. If you like this podcast, then we have some other post-rock episodes. We have a Godspeed You one, which came out last week on our Vault.
Yep.
We also recently, in the last year or so, did one on Vessels, which is a completely different kind of post-rock.
Absolutely. Way back, you can go and listen to the Mogwai one.
We did that too, yeah. So, we're not unfamiliar with this genre, but this is the first time we've actually done a post-rock record that has proper vocals on it, with the singing and everything.
It's true.
So yeah, good stuff. Enjoyed it.
And we'll come back next week with something not quite so apocalyptic.
Yes. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or just send it to your pals if you're just listening to the podcast version. And if you really, really enjoyed it, then patreon.com/unsungpod, where you can subscribe for £4 or your local currency equivalent per month.
How do you follow a discussion about the apocalypse? What do you swing in the opposite direction to try and offset it, or do you ease back into reality?
I think we do something that is utterly ridiculous, like
one of your
Kiss.
farty pop punk bands
like
again.
Kiss. We've done Kiss.
Man, I'll do Kiss
But, you know,
like every second week if you want.
Something, yeah, something really 80s and cheesy.
I'm
as
still
fuck.
itching to re-propose Kiss to do Crazy Nights now that I know that it's an absolute masterpiece.
We don't have the time and for the next episode.
Suddenly we
For
don't
the
have
next
the time.
episode, maybe
Suddenly we don't have the time.
maybe in a few weeks we can do
Yeah.
Kiss, but
Uncanny. how that
but
happened.
I do think that we could do something 80s and ridiculous soon.
A bit buoyant.
Buoyant, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
Challenge accepted.
yes, we will see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Amen.